We got Jaime's coming in. How do you like that? Look like Jaime was there. Here comes Jaime. Good morning, Jaime. Boker Tov.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Welcome back. We miss you at the
I miss
Gemara
you
place.
too.
Morning,
We
Mr.
had
Chair.
great Sunday learning. Great Friday
Amen.
learning, I mean. Friday
I
learning.
love it.
Yeah. Okay. We started a new parak, Mazel Tov Mabruk. Start a new parak. The parak is the fourth parak. It's Bamet Tomnin, which discusses the laws of insulation on Shabbat. The rabbis were concerned. The rabbis made certain, as we know, the rabbis are here to protect. And the rabbis made certain fences of that you can't go ahead and insulate food on Shabbat. Take a pot off the fire on Shabbat and wrap it on all sides on the Shabbat. The rabbi said if you do that, you might come to if it's not hot as the way you wanted it to be, you might come to violate the Shabbat by doing something, by stoking some coals, moving some things around, and therefore they don't want you insulating food on Shabbat. Also, that's only if it's in the original. We'll see more about it if it's in the original pot. But once you put it from the pot into a different container, then when you want to wrap it, that should not be a problem. If you go ahead and insulate food before now on Shabbat, the prohibition is even if you wrap in any type of wrapping, even a wrapping that does not add heat. However, if you're insulating before Shabbat, there's no problem to insulate food before Shabbat, as long as you're insulating with an item that does not add heat. For instance, before Shabbat, now it's the summertime, as Mark said. People are starting their summer schedule. Ladies don't like a hot kitchen. So sometimes people, what they'll do is, let's say for soup for Friday night, sometimes they want to keep a fire off. So right before Shabbat, they will take the pot of soup off the fire and they want to keep it hot. So what do some people do is that they'll take a towel and they'll wrap the soup in the towel before Shabbat. That's not a problem. The towel is not adding any heat. Even if you wrap it on all six sides, it's not whatever how many sides, you're allowed to go ahead and wrap the food before Shabbat, provided that it's an item that not add heat, that's not adding heat. The Mishnah stated, that which items are considered that they add enough heat that add heat, that would be a problem, and which items will not are things that don't add heat. That's what the Mishnah was focused on, and the Mishnah stated that the pulp of someone the pulp of a certain item would gives off certain heat. I mean, let's say if you press olives and you have the pulp, if you would take the pot and wrap it and put it into the olive, the pulp of the olive, that pulp gives off heat, and the Mishnah stated that you would not be able to insulate the food even before Shabbat with that type of with the pulp. Now, what's the issue? Insulating before Shabbat. You did it before Shabbat because the concern is if you insulate it with an item that gives heat, even though it's pulp that gives heat, there's no fire by the pulp, but maybe you'll insulate it with hot ash with remnants of coal, and you might come to stoke those coals on the Shabbat. So therefore, the rabbis were concerned for that. So therefore, they said, don't insulate before Shabbat with anything that adds heat. And the question of the Gemara was, what type of pulp? What we're talking about? We're talking about the pulp of olives, or we're talking about or sesame. So the Gemara understands that the olives give off more heat than the sesame. So the question is, which pulp does the Mishnah refer to? The pulp of the zaysim? That was the Gemara's question. If you look at back into the Gemara, we'll take a look at the Gemara Boilu. Gefesh, you got the Gemara back on 47 before. Iboyuluz Gefesh of Zaitim Tanan, we're referring to the pulp of the olives, of the Shumshimim Shapardami, but the pulp of the sesame would not be a problem. It's not considered that it gives significant heat of anything of real that will be a problem of insulating the food before Shabbat. It sounds like that people might use these items to keep, for insulation purposes, or maybe that's not called really keeping the heat. Or maybe the mission means sesame pulp, and certainly kosher the zaitim tanan. Certainly you can't go ahead and use olive pulp. Now, again, remember, so practically speaking, by the way, we spoke about yesterday, before, we gave a case. Before Shabbat, let's say you have the plata, right, the electric plate that's on, and the electric plate gives off heat. So if before Shabbat you would cover the food that's on that electric plate on all sides, it would seem that should be a problem. Why should that be a problem? Because you are insulating the food. You didn't leave a side open. If you leave a side open, that's not called insulating. But if you cover on all the sides the food before Shabbat, so now it's totally insulated, and this heat that's being added through the heat of the electric plate or whatever, and therefore it should be a problem to according to Beryl Feinstein, I asked him. His opinion was that would be a problem, because we're going to see in our Gemara. I didn't ask him recently. I asked him a while back. We see in our Gemara, the Gemara is going to bring listen to this interesting case. Now, what's unique about the case of the throwing the towel over let's say the kugel before Shabbat? What's the interesting idea? The towel doesn't add heat. The thing that you're insulating with is not adding the heat, but there's some other source that is giving the heat, which is the electric plate. So it's being insulated, and heat is happening, even though it's happening from an outside source, but it's happening, and therefore it should be a problem of insulating with an item that's adding heat. So that is that you can't do even before Shabbat. So remember, the basic rules. This is the basic rule. Everyone got to get it in your sleep. You got to get it, and if they wake you up in the middle of the sleep, you got to be able to say the right answer, right? You'll say your name in the middle of the sleep to be able to say the answer to the question. On Shabbat, you can't take a pot off the fire and wrap it in the towel on all sides. That's called insulating, and the rabbi says you can't do that. Before Shabbat, you can take the pot off the fire and wrap it on all sides, because the towel does not add heat, and heat is not being added. However, before Shabbat, even if if I'm going to wrap it in an item, or I'm going to create a situation that heat is being added and it's being insulated, that would be a problem. Is that clear? Everyone got that clear? That is the issue. So now the Gemara says, Tashma, the Omer of Zerah b'shmachad ben Ayanai, kupa shetomem ba. If you have a box and you placed Rashi says, let's say you placed some cotton, and that's how you insulated the pot. You have a pot insulated in cotton in a box. So, and what happened was, so let's say we're talking about cotton, dry cotton, and dry cotton doesn't add any heat. But the issue here was you went ahead and you put it on, and are you allowed to put it on the pulp of olives before Shabbat? So here is the pulp of the olives is not the item that's insulating, that's wrapping the food, right? The food is wrapped in cotton. The cotton is in the box. But the box, if you put this box, let's say there's holes in the box, on the bottom of the box, or even if there's not, if you rest it on this pulp, there'll be a certain amount of heat coming from the pulp up into the box, which would be you be working to help the the food that's in the pot. So we say asula nicha gafesh zeitim. You can't place it on the pulp. So we see from here, Shema minosha zeitim tanan. The fact that he says the only thing you can't put it on is he says the zefesh al zeitim. He was very specific for the olive pulp. Indicates that the sesame pulp you would be able to put it on, because if he held that you can't even put on sesame pulp, you should say the bigger chidush. The novelty is that even even sesame pulp would be considered giving off heat, and therefore before Shabbat you would not be able to do that. But the Gemara says no proof. Maybe sesame also gives off enough heat, and you would not be able to wrap a food before Shabbat in the sesame pulp. However, in Asuki Havla, now on Memchet Amal 48a, Mazel Tov Mabruk. But when it comes to heat going up, since you're not using the sesame pulp to wrap to insulate the food, you're using the sesame pulp as a heating source that's underneath the pot that's wrapped in the cotton. And you want that the heat of the sesame pulp to go up and be considered it's being this heat coming, added heat here. So the sesame pulp does not have that strength to go up. And therefore that would not be a problem putting it on the pulp of the sesame. If you rest that pot that was wrapped in cotton in a box on top of that sesame pulp. However, the chidush is that olives are so strong that the heat would go up and it would be a problem. So that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says the Indian. It doesn't say not. I don't think too much of anything, but see from the Gemara that it does give off something. So the Gemara says the Indian Asuki Havla regarding bringing heat. The Zaitim Maski Havla. The Zaitim it adds heat to the pot. However, the Shum Shemim Lo Maski Havla. But if it's sesame, the heat will not go up, and therefore it would not be a problem before Shabbat to rest that pot that's wrapped in the cotton in the box on top of the sesame pulp. Okay. Now the Gemara says, Rabba Rav Zera. There are two great rabbis. Rabba Rav Zera, Ikula Bei Reish Galuta. They came to the house of Reish Galuta. Is the rabbi, the person who's head of the Galut. He's the leading figure for the Jewish people in exile, and let's say in Bavel, in Babylon. Chazi lahu avda. They saw there was a servant in the house. The anach kuzad maya puma de kumkuma. They saw that he placed a jug of cold water on let's say on a tea kettle, on some sort of a kettle, because the kettle was hot, and he wanted to heat the water in the jug. So he went ahead and he placed on the Shabbat. Now you have cold water. So let's say he wanted to take away some of the chill of the cold water, but what? But you might leave it there it might leave it there too long. It might lead to actually heating the water, cooking the water. So he said, on top of this kettle, top of this hot kettle, that yes, yes. Let's say you have a kettle holds water. Let's say you have some sort of tea kettle, and you take a little small little jug and you put it on top of it. Let's say tea kettle's wide. Let's say a kettle, some sort of kettle that's wide that you can actually rest something on top of it. the kettle's hot. We don't whether the kettle's on a fire or not. That detail is not. What'd you say?
Kettle's not being heated. Is it?
So they bring in the Ran. There's one explanation says that the kettle was on top of fire, and one explanation was not on top of fire. It's a different explanation how to understand the case of the Gemara, whether the kettle's on the fire, but the kettle is hot. That for our purposes, the kettle is hot, and he put it on the top of the kettle. So V'nazir Rabbah, a rabbi told him you can't do that. Even though, so here, it's like you're a guest in someone else's house, but you're the rabbi, you know the law. You see the servant who is not a rabbi, he might not know the law. Not all like waiters in every place, all the waiters, if you have Jewish waiters, they all know the laws of, are they all well versed in the laws of Shabbat? Maybe not necessarily not. Just, just talk about Jewish waiters off the subject, just to give you a little story, that my father-in-law was once at a convention, let's say a convention for education, Jewish education. My father-in-law says at the convention, he wasn't running the convention, but he said, we got to make a minyan for the waiters. Here we are at a convention, we're promoting Torah. But these guys, who are the waiters at a convention? These are young teenagers that are trying to make $1. Those are the people you gotta don't forget about the waiters. You like that, Marky? Because you never know. You're at a place, you see. Think about the waiters, the Jewish waiters, the Russian kids that are waitering, making $1, or the immigrant kids, whoever they were. Okay. So the Gemara says, Amalei Rav Zera. So okay. See, Amalei Rav Zera. Rav Zera says, to Rabbah, Maishna me mecham agami mecham. What this jug of cold water that you forbade to place on top of this kettle, if you have a one kettle, let's say one kettle on top of another kettle. Let's say you have a small kettle, you could put a small kettle on the top of a big kettle, and in order to keep the heat. And we don't say it's a problem. We don't say it's a problem. Then what's different than the cold jug? So that's his question, but he's going to answer the cold. So someone will explain. There, you're only keeping the heat. When you put one kettle on top of the other kettle, it's for something that's already warm. That case is already warm. You're just keeping the heat. But if you're going ahead and actually putting something that's cold, that has the ability to become hot, to become cooked, that's a much different ballgame. I'm saying if the thing, if it's warm, if it's already.
The kettle much hotter than this kettle. This kettle starts to get hotter to the point I would recoil. That's asur.
Okay, so that's the question is, that's the question. If you have a food, when you're talking about food that's already fully cooked and it's hot, but the fact that it's not boiling, right? So now now it's not boiling. Let's say you have a tea.
Warm.
It's warm. But is that called, the question is that called cooking? Because it's already cooked, it's still benefiting from the cooking because it's still hot. And that's Ashkenazim are a little more lenient on that. I don't know if to put this farther, but something that's already still hot.
No, we're talking liquid.
Let's say we're talking liquid, right? We're talking liquid, but the food, but it's hot, it's cooked, and now you just want to okay, but water.
In this case here, they're putting warm water on top of the hot kettle.
Warm water, right? So
leave it there,
it's going to get stronger. The heat's going to get stronger, but it's already cooked. Remember, it's not
warm water.
meaning it's warm. It's warm water that was cooked already. It reached the level of cooking before. So now it's not a new cook. There's no concern. The rabbis don't need to make,
Warm to recoil.
Right.
It's not a problem.
it might not be a problem, right?
Come on.
Because it was already cooked, you're not cooking anything here. The only question is it looking like cooking? Does it have an appearance of cooking? What's the issue? What should be the issue? If you take something that's already cooked and it's hot, once it cools down, then you have a big problem. If it's not hot, then you have a big problem. Your question is if it's not recoiling, it's not,
You put it on, it's warm, and then after you leave, you kind of forget it there. Gets to the point of you recoil your finger.
I understand, but I'm just saying, I'm just making a case. Again, we have to see in all opinions. I'm just making a case that something was ready boiled, ready cooked,
Yeah.
and it's still hot. That could be. Now it doesn't say, Mark, exactly what level of, was it recoiling, was it yatsalevas or not. It just says you placed a kettle on top of another kettle. It could be that, I mean, just for according to you, the way you're asking the question, to answer you, it could be that it was recoiling, but he just wanted to keep that way. He wanted to keep that heat. So that's what the Gemara says. So he says, Amalei hatam akume kamukim. You're just leaving. You're just keeping it hot, and it's just making it that it remains hot. Therefore, there's no problem. Here, you are actually adding heat to this water, and some want to say that maybe it's going to add heat that could go ahead and actually cook this water. That's how some understand different interpretations, how to read this, how to understand this Gemara. This is one. I'm giving you the way the Masifta of the Gemara, one of the explanations that they went with. So that's the. And therefore, there's a concern that you might come to cook. The obvious problem with this shot of this is because there's an obvious difference between the two opinions. Meaning, what was the question? Meaning, if this is the explanation that according to this understanding of the Gemara, it wasn't the difference obvious from the beginning. One he took cold water, one he put hot water. One was a kettle with cold water, one's a kettle with hot water. So of course, maybe there's a difference between a kettle with cold water. Maybe there's more of a concern that the rabbi might be concerned. The rabbis might be concerned. And when it's a kettle of hot water, we're just keeping the heat. So that's why it's a little, that would be a little question.
Is the top kettle considered insulation?
I'm saying, other commentaries talk about the insulation, but the question is, where is the insulation? Because you didn't wrap anything. So I'm saying that's why there's other ways of understanding other interpretations of how far, what's called insulation, how far does insulation go? So, but I'm not going with that shot. Hatmana means insulation. So insulation is where you want to keep the heat. You're interested in keeping the heat, and maybe sometimes some insulation might actually add. Some items might have the ability to add to the heat, add to it. And the rabbis say, don't insulate, like we said, food on Shabbat in any form. Meaning with using any type of item to insulate. If it actually insulates it, you cover all sides. Leave one side open. That seems to be a leniency that we hold. That's the leniency that most people hold of. That's not called insulation. That's not the way I saw Rabbi Ribbiat. He has a sefer called Lametet Melachot. It's a great sefer. It's a 4-volume set. They might have. I think they might have it called 39 Melachot. And he writes in how much you need to leave open in order to be considered that's not insulating. So I think he writes over there, what would if you would be insulating something, how much would you cover? Good morning. If you whatever amount, if you're not insulate, whatever you would leave open when you're not insulating, that's called leaving open, right? If the normal way to insulate the item would be to do it 95% cover it, and that's what it sounds like from him. But you didn't cover it 95. You left it open enough that that's not the way people would insulate. That's not called insulation. Because the whole issue, and that so he didn't say one side. You know what I mean? A lot of people say leave one side open. Don't cover the whole thing. Leave this side open, leave that side open. Because the whole issue is when you're looking to keep heat. Because if you're looking to keep the heat, if you're looking to insulate something, you want to keep the heat. So then we're nervous about you. We're worried about what you're going to do because you're looking to keep something hot. So therefore, we're nervous if you go ahead. It's called the kosher nervousness. Don't be nervous in life. It's not good to be nervous. People are nervous. It's not good. Right? We are concerned. It's a concern. It's a better word. We are concerned that you might come, if you're looking to insulate, let's say it's Friday afternoon.
Goes back to cold.
It goes back to the cold. So right, Friday, right. Some will say it's all right. Go back to the coals. You might come to Friday afternoon. If you're going to insulate Friday afternoon, so what are you insulating with? If you're insulating with something that's going to add heat, so then we're afraid maybe you're going to go insulate with an item with coal, with ash and coals, and there on Shabbat you're going to come to rake it. So therefore, anything that adds heat before Shabbat you can't insulate. But if you insulate with something that doesn't add heat, we're not as, since it's before Shabbat, you're not showing it sounds like, I presume you're not showing your great concern to how hot this should be. But if you really be worried about it before Shabbat, that you're so worried about, you would insulate with something that adds heat. In fact, you insulate with something that doesn't add heat, you're calm, you're relaxed. We're not afraid you're going to go move things around on Shabbat. But on Shabbat itself, if you insulate with something that even that doesn't add heat, what's the problem? Because once you're involved in insulating, and then if you see, and if you insulate it, and if let's say you see it's not hot, so then there's a concern you might come to do something.
Come on.
You say, what's the big concern, right?
So you should be concerned about that if someone takes something out of their thing and put it in a bowl, not in insulation. Or put it in another candy. It's not hot. Okay, maybe I'm gonna do something.
Because it's very good. So when you put it into another keli, Mark, you fell into the trap, kosher trap. When you put it into another, you know it's gonna go.
It's gonna go down.
It does go down.
Well, maybe it's not hot enough. So you can say, okay, it's not hot enough. I put it into another keli. I gotta warm this up. If I put it into a thing that's insulated, if I go to put it into an insulated bottle, it gives no heat. That's kosher. It's allowed.
No, again, on the Shabbat, again, you put it into, right, because you put it into a different utensil. So now your question is, that's a good question. Your question is, if the purpose of the utensil is to insulate, should that be a problem on Shabbat? That's a great question.
There's no heat added.
I'm right. But even if it's no heat added, we can't insulate. We said on
thermos on Shabbat.
On Shabbat again, thermos is a different utensil. So that's a unique question, meaning to say, good morning, Nathan. If I go ahead and I take a pot off the fire on Shabbat, and I want to wrap the pot with a towel on Shabbat, I can't do that. Why? Because the concern is I'll wrap the pot in the towel, and then if I see that it's not so hot, I might come to do something with the coals. I might come to, the Aruch HaShulchan has a discussion about, about this concern. What's the big concern here? Generally, we're not afraid. How far are we afraid? That's what's bothering you. Maybe I'll get at the right.
So you see the food that's not hot enough, what are you gonna do about it? Not only wrap it. I see the food's not hot enough. Who can do that?
So good. So that's why we have many laws. That's why we have certain laws on Shabbat that I can't go ahead and place food that was, let's say, if it was not a half cooked or third cooked before Shabbat, because we're afraid. Even though I put it on before Shabbat, I'm afraid I might come to do something on Shabbat. So we do find that that we have these concerns. There are situations that we have concerns. Let me. There's a nice Aruch HaShulchan here. Let's see if we, how fast I'll find it. He gets Rishon and Gimel, Rishon and Zion, that he discusses this, let's see. He says like this. I think, morning, Haron.
Always.
Some other men. Yeah.
Anytime you have it, why is wrapping it with a towel going to create to make you reheat it? It's not out of it. You know, if you don't wrap it, like take it and I look at it and I don't wrap it, and say, oh, this is not out of it. Why don't they say they're gonna reheat that? One's wrapping.
He
is
said-
not-
Right.
One's wrapping it, get people to reheat it.
Well, that's a good question.
Here it goes, Aruch HaShulchan. So here comes Aruch HaShulchan, Sivan Rishon and Zion, Halacha Beis. He says, by the way, it's interesting halacha, by the way, that Bein Hashmashot, if it's between twilight, you could take the pot off and wrap it, twilight, with the non-thing that doesn't add heat. Why? Because twilight, since it's still generally hot, when you took it off, it's burning hot, we're not afraid you're not afraid you're gonna come to do anything, it's very hot already. But once
That's current halacha?
with current halacha, he said, right, rak ben hashmashot is mutar, but now, because it's not adding heat and it's ben hashmashot.
After not.
After not, when it's night not, right. Now, he says like this. If it's something that adds heat, we're afraid. Now, he said like this. In a kavana, we're not afraid when we say that you can't, tam is sebedova, if it doesn't add heat, it's something that doesn't add heat on Shabbat. Even though you're only keeping the heat, because we're afraid you're going to come do some sort of cooking. So he says, usually, it doesn't mean you're actually going to come actual cooking, because you'll find that it's not hot, and you might come cook to cook. The rabbis were only concerned that you're going to rake the coals, which happens in 1 second. The rabbis weren't concerned that you're going to go ahead and start cooking on Shabbat. You're going to make that mistake of cooking on Shabbat. But something that requires time, they not make the gzeirah. Just like think it through. Just like he says, you don't make a gzeirah by you have an oven that's sealed. Let's say you put some paste something to seal the oven. And if you need, in order for you to go ahead, we're not afraid, you're going to go ahead and remove the seal. You're going to remove the seal and stoke the coals. Because once you have that seal there, you're gonna catch yourself, let's say. But the kavana is that he says, you're gonna rake the fire that's around it until, because he's learning that there's some sort of raking the fires that are around the pot that you're taking out when you're doing it in order to keep the heat. But the bottom line is, right, it's a stoking issue. Exactly. That's how he's learning. It's a stoking issue that the rabbis were concerned. If your intention is to take a pot on Shabbat and you want it morning, you take the pot on Shabbat, and your good friend is here, Mark. If you take your pot on Shabbat and your intention is to insulate it to keep the heat, so then their rabbis have that's the rabbi's zera. So that will be practically speaking for our days. Like I said, if you want Friday
That you could wrap it during Ben HaSmashot.
with something that doesn't add heat, even on all sides, Ben Hashmashot.
You can't wrap anything after
Night.
nighttime, no matter.
Right.
You
After
wash
No, no, that's not called wrapping.
Oh, so you have to leave one side open.
Leave one side, you're good.
And before you can wrap it.
As long as you're wrapping with something that does not add heat. Before
The
Shabbat,
crock pot is like that.
oh, so the answer was the crock pot. So it has that, but the one answer is that the
That's
top,
insulated for sure.
right, but the top, the cover is part of the pot. It's not considered insulation. You know, so that's not called insulating. It's not the way you insulate. It's a regular pot. If you throw something on top of the cover, then you get into a different problem.
So, but we also held that on Shabbat, you could put something in the fence.
So that's a question, because the thermos is unique, because here you actually, the purpose of it is to insulate. So that's homework.
We don't know.
That we don't know. We have to get back, we have to do homework. Mark said give the rabbi homework. Okay, everybody have a great day. 7:26 for beautiful davening, and welcome back.
Thank you, thank you.
If you're ever thinking that you should come to the class,